Imagine this. You enter a marble dining hall, glittering with gold. The emperor sits at the far end of a long banquet table, surrounded by nobles, music, and laughter. The food is steaming, the goblets filled with rare wine, but before the emperor touches a bite, you must taste it first. One sip could bring you fortune, or it could leave you twitching on the floor, foaming at the mouth. You are invisible, disposable, essential. You are the royal food taster, and in the ancient world, you were the difference between life and sudden, excruciating death. Across empires from Persia to Rome, from dynasties of China to kingdoms of Africa, food tasters walked a terrifying line. In some courts, they were trusted bodyguards. In others, slaves, sometimes rewarded, often replaced, always expendable. In this episode, we're plunging into the bizarre, paranoid world of poison and power. You'll meet a king who drank poison like wine, learn how dinner parties turned into deadly games, and discover the creepy lengths ancient chefs went to ensure loyalty or eliminate rivals. So stay close, but not too close. Chapter 1. What it was really like to be a royal food taster. To be a food taster was to live in a constant state of controlled panic. In the courts of ancient rulers, paranoia reigned alongside power. Assassination through poison wasn't just possible, it was expected. Ambitious sons, scheming viziers, spurned lovers, any of them might slip something lethal into a royal goblet. And so came the invention of an unsettling profession. The human test subject, the royal food taster. The role varied widely across cultures. In ancient Rome, pregustitors were official palace staff, often slaves or low-status servants. They were responsible for tasting every dish and drink before it reached the emperor's table. In theory, if the food was poisoned, the taster would die, saving the emperor's life. In practice, it was a grim, thankless task. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that breakfast might kill you. The day would begin in the palace kitchens. You'd stand quietly beside the head cook, watching every ingredient. A royal meal wasn't just prepared, it was guarded. All food was monitored from the moment it entered the gates, yet the fear of corruption never went away. You might taste olive oil, honeyed meats, imported fish, or exotic fruit from Syria. Some were rare delicacies, others notorious for hiding bitter toxins. You'd take a spoonful, swallow, wait. Some poisons worked fast. Belladonna and hemlock could cause convulsions within minutes. Others, like arsenic, were slower, bringing on nausea, dizziness, and eventual collapse. A taster had to know the symptoms and sometimes fake ignorance. There are whispered accounts of food tasters who noticed something was wrong and quietly excused themselves, never to return. What made the role even more bizarre was how invisible it was. You were present at every feast, yet never acknowledged. Some emperors deliberately kept their food tasters anonymous, fearing they'd be bribed or blackmailed. Others elevated them into One Persian king reportedly gave his taster gold chains and then executed him a week later when a dinner guest fell ill. There were no rules, only suspicion. Food tasters learned not to form attachments. They rarely lasted long. One slip of the tongue, one rumor, one slight stomachache suffered by a noble after dinner, and the taster was gone, replaced, often killed, just in case. In China's Tang dynasty, tasters were chosen from the military. In the Mughal courts of India, some were eunuchs, seen as ink. In Japan, emperors had entire tasting brigades, where food passed through layers of lower officials before it reached royal lips. Some food tasters took pride in their role. Others tried to flee. A few were even accused of being double agents, poisoning themselves just slowly enough to kill the king later. No matter the culture, one thing was true. In the war between fear and loyalty, you were the first casualty. And if you think that's unsettling, wait until you meet a king who didn't need a food taster, because he was his own poison expert. Mithridates VI of Pontus was not your average ancient king. He was a toxicologist, a rebel, a military genius, and one of the most paranoid men in history. He ruled a kingdom along the southern shores of the Black Sea, in what is now northern Turkey, during the 1st century BCE. But his true legacy wasn't built on gold or conquest, it was built on poison. Because Mithridates lived in constant fear of being assassinated, and he had good reason. His father had been poisoned. His court was riddled with spies. His own mother may have tried to kill him. So, before he even reached adulthood, young Mithridates disappeared into exile. He lived in the wilderness, far from his palace, far from his enemies. And there, the legend began. The forest experiments. As the story goes, Mithridates spent his exile studying every herb, venom, and mineral toxin he could find in the wild. He tested them on animals, on prisoners, on himself. Snake venom, deadly nightshade, hemlock, strychnine, even powdered gemstones and crushed bugs. But his goal wasn't to kill. His goal was to survive. What Mithridates wanted was immunity, the power to resist poison in any form, to be unkillable by chemical means. And over time, it's said he succeeded. He began ingesting small, measured doses of lethal substances every day, slowly building resistance. His meals became experiments, his body a living laboratory. He was becoming, quite literally, poison-proof. The ancient historian Pliny the Elder later claimed that Mithridates created a universal antidote, a concoction so powerful it could counter nearly any toxin. It was known as the Mithridateum, and it became legendary. Recipes varied, but some versions included over 50 ingredients: opium, honey, saffron, viper, flesh, myrrh, wine, garlic, and more. Visual. A parchment scroll slowly unfurls across the screen, listing ingredients in Greek and Latin. For the rest of his life, Mithridates consumed his antidote daily, turning breakfast into a bizarre ritual of controlled poisoning. And it worked. Or so he believed. Poison and power. When Mithridates returned to power, he declared war on Rome itself. Not once, not twice, 3 times. These became known as the Mithridatic Wars. He was a genius tactician and master of propaganda, using Greek nationalism to rally cities against Roman influence. He even ordered the infamous Asiatic Vespers, coordinated massacre of tens of thousands of Romans living in Asia Minor. This made him a legend, and Rome's worst nightmare. But in every palace, every camp, every meal, Mithridates remained obsessed with being poisoned. He would never eat unless his food taster had tried it first. Even allies weren't trusted. Cups were tested with silver pins to detect arsenic. Dishes were inspected for residue. Servants were rotated constantly to prevent conspiracy. His paranoia was so intense that it became protocol. His children were taught toxicology. His lovers feared him. Even when he grew old, his reputation as the Poison King terrified those around him. Some believed his touch alone was dangerous. And then irony struck. The death he couldn't control. After decades of fighting, betrayal, and bitter resistance, Mithridates found himself cornered, defeated by his own son, of all people, abandoned, surrounded, and unwilling to be captured by the Romans. The king decided to take his own life. He called for poison, but after years of building immunity, it didn't work. The legend goes that he swallowed a lethal dose but felt nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. He was immune to his own escape. Desperate, he called for a soldier to end his life by sword. Thus died the man who had tried to conquer death from the inside out, a legacy that lingered. Mithridates' obsession with poison left a deep mark on history, Roman emperors particularly. Nero became fascinated with antidotes and hired Greek physicians to replicate his formulas. The idea of what we know for sure is this: Mithridates made fear a science. He weaponized paranoia, and in doing so, he blurred the line between poison and power, life and death. He remains one of the most bizarre, fascinating rulers in the ancient world, not because he feared death, but because he tried to outsmart it, one drop at a time. But while Mithridates turned himself into a human antidote, others preferred to hide their poisons in beauty, wine, and ceremony. Coming up next, the strange world of ancient toxins. assassins, and secret recipes of death.
In the ancient world, poison was the silent assassin. It needed no sword, no army, and left no wound. It could slip past guards, hide in perfumes, seep into food or drink. A single drop could bring down a king, silence a rival, or tip the balance of empires. But while modern poisons are manufactured in labs, the ancients relied on the earth, the forest, the venomous, and the wild, and over centuries they developed an intimate, terrifying relationship with nature's deadliest gifts. In this chapter, we explore the poisons that haunted ancient courts, their chemistry, their myth, their use and their eerily creative methods of delivery. Hemlock, the philosopher's executioner. We begin with hemlock, the poison that ended the life of Socrates. Conium maculatum, or poison hemlock, is a deceptively beautiful plant, native to the Mediterranean. It grows tall and leafy, with small white flowers arranged in clusters. To the untrained eye, it resembles parsley or wild carrots. To the trained assassin, it was a tool of perfect silence. In ancient Greece, hemlock was the state-approved method of execution. It was not seen as violent, but dignified, philosophical. When Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth of Athens, he accepted his fate calmly. According to Plato's account, Socrates drank the cup without fear. Minutes later, he began to feel cold, his legs going numb, the paralysis slowly creeping upward until it stopped his heart. The poison works by disrupting the nervous system, shutting down muscles, including the lungs. Hemlock was often dried, ground, and mixed with wine or water. It was slow enough to allow a final speech, merciful in its own way, but always final. Ironically, in Rome, centuries later, hemlock became known as the philosopher's drink, wolfsbane, the herb of witches and wolves. Next came wolfsbane, or aconitum nap. Its deep blue petals and hooded shape earned it the nickname monkshood. But don't let the poetic name fool you. Every part of the plant is deadly. Wolfsbane contains aconitine, a powerful neurotoxin that causes burning, vomiting, and total cardiac failure. Unlike hemlock, which was used in courts, wolfsbane belonged to the shadow stew, the assassins, the herbalists, the witches. In ancient Europe, it was smeared on hunting spears. In parts of India and China, its extracts were used in warfare, painted onto arrowheads. And in myth, wolfsbane could kill werewolves, dispel evil spirits, and silence curses. A single leaf, steeped in wine, could kill a man in under an hour. What made wolfsbane so feared was how easily it could be hidden. Just a pinch in honey, a few drops in herbal tea. Sometimes it was disguised as a remedy for fever until it became a remedy for everything. In Roman times, the Emperor Claudius outlawed it, not because of superstition, but because his own physicians feared its popularity as a tool of revenge among nobles, snake venoms, and royal assassins. Nature's pharmacy was not limited to plants. Venoms, especially from snakes, became elite tools of murder and suicide alike. Egyptian nobility believed the cobra venom delivered by bite, or through powdered form, was a noble way to die. Cleopatra famously chose a venomous snake as her final executioner. Though some historians debate the method, cobras were symbols of royalty and resurrection, but their venom caused respiratory failure, convulsions, and a slow, paralyzing end. Meanwhile, in India and Persia, assassins kept venom in rings or hollowed-out jewelry. A scratch on the skin, a drop in the ear, a kiss laced with toxin, these were more than legends. There are records of kings dying suddenly after romantic encounters or ceremonial exchanges, with snake venom suspected every time. What made venom so terrifying was its dual role. It was medicine and murder. sacred and profane. In low doses, some venoms were used to treat fever and arthritis. In higher doses, they silenced whole dynasties. Arsenic. The colorless killer, perhaps the most famous of all ancient poisons, was arsenic. Arsenic was used by the Greeks, Romans, Indians, and Chinese alike. It came in several forms, most of them odorless and tasteless, making it the perfect hidden weapon. Dissolved in wine, cooked into food, or mixed with cosmetics, it became the preferred tool for slow, undetectable killing. Unlike fast poisons, arsenic killed gradually over days or weeks. Victims appeared to be wasting away from a natural illness, and if they began to suspect foul play, it was often too late. In Renaissance Italy, arsenic gained the nickname inheritance powder. But its use was ancient. The Romans even suspected it was behind the deaths of emperors. Some were poisoned so expertly that historians still debate whether their deaths were natural or planned. What's more, arsenic could be disguised in medicines and makeup. Wealthy Roman women used powdered arsenic to whiten their skin, not knowing it was slowly poisoning them. This wasn't just a poison, it was fashion, politics, and vanity rolled into one. Death by mushroom. Let's not forget the humble mushroom. One of the most feared fungi in the ancient world was Amanita phalloides, also known as the death cat. It resembles edible mushrooms and has a surprisingly mild taste. But within hours of ingestion, it causes liver failure, hallucinations, and coma. There is no antidote. Roman Emperor Claudius is rumored to have been killed by a dish of poisoned mushrooms served by his wife, Agrippina, paving the way for her son Nero to become emperor. Whether the mushrooms were truly toxic or simply a cover for more exotic poisons, no one knows. But the image stuck. The soft, deadly killer served with garnish. Mushrooms became both feared and fetishized. In Norse myth, certain mushrooms were thought to grant visions or berserker rage. In Japan, they were tied to spiritual rituals and forest spirits. But in many courts, a mushroom was more feared than a knife. The Poisoner's Cookbook. Many of these ancient poisons were catalogued into manuals passed down among alchemists, priests, and doctors. The Greek physician Dioscorides compiled over 600 medicinal and poisonous substances in the 1st century CE. His writings became the blueprint for early toxicology, but others went further, compiling entire libraries of assassination techniques. In India, the Arthashastra advised kings on how to poison rivals during diplomatic banquets. In Persia, secret codes were used to record toxic recipes with ingredients like mercury, crushed emeralds, dried toads, and goat bile. Some poisons were so complex they required weeks to prepare. Others were believed to kill based on astrological alignment or spoken curses. It was part science, part superstition, and no one knew which was more dangerous. The invisible killers today. While many ancient poisons are no longer in common use, their legacy lingers. Some, like arsenic and aconite, are still studied in forensic science. Others are part of modern medicine, distilled into controlled doses. But the fear they evoked, the suspicion they bred is timeless. In the ancient world, a meal was never just a meal. It was a test, a threat, a gamble, and poison. It was always there, waiting just one drop away. Imagine sitting down to a royal banquet. Golden plates, roasted meat, goblets filled with crimson wine. The air smells of cinnamon, garlic, honey. Laughter echoes across the marble walls. And yet, no one dares take the first bite, because in the ancient world, to dine with kings and queens was to dine with danger. In this chapter, we enter the terrifyingly paranoid world of ancient royal feasts where food was both celebration and weapon, and every bite could be your last. From assassins hiding behind platters of grapes, to rulers who refused to eat unless their tasters lived through the first course, we explore the tense, ritualized, and utterly bizarre world of elite dining, where every meal was a game of trust, fear, and power. The ritual of the royal banquet. Ancient banquets weren't just dinners, they were theater. In ancient Greece, Rome, Persia, China, and beyond, feasts served as platforms for diplomacy, alliances, and displays of wealth. The more exotic the food, the more powerful the host. Peacock tongues, fermented fish sauce, camel hump fat, stuffed dormice, or honey-roasted songbirds. There were no limits to what could appear on a royal plate. Food was spectacle, especially in Rome, where emperors like Elagabalus would hide gold coins inside loaves of bread, or serve fake fruits made entirely of meat. But behind the opulence lurked terror, because poison was everywhere, and everyone knew it. Paranoia and protocols. Trust no one. Royalty developed obsessive rituals to protect themselves. The Persian kings of the Achaemenid Empire ate only food prepared by trained from childhood to never speak of what they saw. These kitchen staff were often mutilated or tattooed, ensuring their silence and loyalty. In imperial China, the emperor's meals were divided into multiple small portions, each cooked by a different team and delivered through locked corridors to reduce the risk of tampering. Some emperors kept 3 rotating kitchens, working in secret, so no one could predict where the food would come from. Roman emperors, famously paranoid, had testers for every stage tasters. Some had ceremonial priests bless each dish. Others refused to eat unless they watched it being cooked from start to finish. And still, they died. Claudius, Commodus, Caracalla, all believed to have been poisoned at the table. Their caution couldn't save them. Guests brought their own spoons. In elite circles, even the guests came prepared. It was common for nobles to bring their own silverware, not for etiquette, but for survival. In Byzantine courts, aristocrats dined with personal forks, knives, and cups, fearing contamination. Silver was thought to detect poison turning black when exposed to arsenic or mercury. Some diners even carried small scratching stones to test a dish before tasting. In ancient India, high-ranking guests had bodyguards posted beside them during meals, watching both the host and the servants. It was less a party, more a military operation, and when a ruler wanted to send a subtle threat, they'd offer a personal toast, ... and then refuse to drink from their own cup. The invisible war of the wine was a common vehicle for murder. It masked flavors, it was served warm, and it was traditionally poured by slaves or servants, many of whom were invisible to the elite, and thus easily bribed. To counter this, elite courts created a caste of trusted winebearers, individuals trained from childhood to observe ritual purity. In Rome, a cupbearer often held more trust than a senator. In ancient Egypt, wine was sealed with the pharaoh's personal stamp, and even the wax was inspected for tampering. In Japan's Heian period, nobles only drank from shared cups in strict ceremonial order, believing that to step out of turn invited misfortune or death. Visual. Delicate hands pouring sake into a shallow bowl, steam rising in dim candlelight. One Persian text even advised hosts to pretend to drink, while spilling the contents into hidden cloth pouches sewn into their robes. The message was clear: never let your lips touch what others have touched. Subtle poisons. From aphrodisiacs to madness, not all poisons killed quickly. Some were meant to weaken, to humiliate, or to drive victims mad. In ancient Mesopotamia, priests would spike a rival's drink with mandrake, causing confusion, hallucinations, and forgetfulness. Roman elites had access to poisons that caused incontinence, trembling, or partial blindness, perfect for ruining a noble's public appearance. In royal courts, even whispers of poisoning could destroy a reputation. If a guest stumbled, trembled, or vomited, the host became a suspect. In Egypt, certain brews laced with belladonna or opium were used to make enemies appear intoxicated or insane. An easy way to discredit a rival before the court. The food tasters. First to dine, first to die. Of course, no court was complete without its food taster, often a nameless servant who tasted each bite before the ruler did. If they lived, the meal proceeded. If they died, the party ended early. Some tasters were slaves. Others were nobles rewarded with prestige but expected to risk death daily. In China's Temp's dynasty, tasters were rotated daily to avoid favoritism or familiarity. In ancient Rome, some rulers demanded double tasters, one to try the dish, another to observe the first. Even pets weren't spared. Claudius is said to have used a small dog to test sausages after a particularly close call. The psychological toll was immense. Every bite was a gamble, every taste a potential execution, and yet the practice remained a fixture across empires, because in the minds of kings and queens, one dead taster was better than one dead ruler. Feasting as political theatre in many ways, elite banquets were wars in disguise. Enemies sat side by side, rivals toasted one another, and everyone knew the food could decide the future. Alliances were forged over lamb, betrayals announced over wine. In medieval Islamic courts, the term bread and salt signified a sacred pact. You could not harm someone you had dined with, but many did anyway. Feasts became weapons. A poisoned dish could eliminate a threat with no bloodshed. A feast with no poisoning scent, a powerful message of control. I could kill you, but I chose not to. And sometimes hosts would serve decoy dishes, poisoned meals placed in front of trusted lieutenants, meant to see how quickly the guests noticed. Or whether anyone panicked. It wasn't just about survival, it was about sending a message. You are never safe. The final toast. Today, we look at ancient banquets and marvel at the opulence, the golden goblets, exotic animals, flowing wine, but beneath it all was an ancient truth. Power breeds paranoia. In elite courts, food was never just sustenance, it was ceremony, weapon, test, and too often, death sentence. So the next time you see a painting of kings dining by candlelight, remember, behind the smiles, the laughter, and the silver platters, there were eyes watching, fingers trembling, and somewhere, a goblet no one dared to touch. Tonight, we followed the bitter aftertaste of history, a trail of poison, paranoia, and power. You stepped into the shoes of a royal food taster, where every bite could mean your last. You met a king so terrified of being assassinated, he made poison part of his daily diet. You learned the forgotten recipes of ancient toxins, and wandered the tense, glittering halls of elite banquets where guests toasted with trembling hands, and through it all, one truth remained. To be close to power in the ancient world was to be dangerously close to death. Which part of tonight's story haunted you the most? Was it the silent death lurking in a goblet, the palace servants who tasted meals before kings, or the thought that, even surrounded by luxury, fear was always on the menu? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone. If you enjoyed this slow unraveling of history's strangest shadows, give this video a like, and consider subscribing. We've only begun to explore the weird and eerie corners of the ancient world. Next time, We'll journey somewhere even stranger, where lost cities still whisper, and some ruins are said to scream. Until then, sleep well, and don't forget to test your wine.